Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today I'm going to talk about the top 5 expensive knives. Now before I get into my actual list, I want to have just a little bit of fun and share with you some truly expensive knives that are out there and demonstrate that this is really a subjective conversation, okay? I would also like to ask, before I start sharing some of mine with you, I'd love to hear in the comments below some of the just truly outlandish prices that you've heard of on knives. Okay, I've got a few here coming up that I think will just be fun to kind of share and think about. The first off is the Jewel of the Orient, and that knife was commissioned a few years ago, and I want to say the person who commissioned it paid like $1.2 million. And later, I think right after they received it, if I remember the story correctly, they went ahead and listed it for sale for like $2.1 million. So, you know, when we talk about expensive knives, that is an expensive knife, okay? Now, there are also a whole list of knives that sell in the tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars, okay? So, you know, you can look around and you can find stories of knives going for, you know, 90, 80, 100, $200,000. There are quite a few of those out there. One of the things I found interesting was there's like a whole sort of niche market for these crazy expensive Japanese sushi knives, and I'll throw one in, a picture of one in here now, as well as some folders that are like extremely elaborate and ornate with gold and diamonds and rubies and all kinds of things going on, intricate working and carvings done on them. And again, those are like in that tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars, well outside of my interest and probably most of yours as well. But it's kind of fun just to see these crazy extravagant things. Like we'll take, you know, the first minute and a half and pretend we're on an episode of that guy with the caviar dreams. I can't think of his name right now, but please someone help me out in the comments. All right, so yeah, there are those crazy expensive knives. Now, as we kind of step down a notch and get into a world that maybe some of you watching are a little bit more familiar with, there are what I'm going to class as high-end customs, okay? So, you know, you see like Kirby Lambert or Gustavo Cecchini or Todd Rexford knives or Daryl Ralph knives and a few others that we could list. I'm going to throw a picture in here from Arizona Custom Knives. You know, when you hear about these knives going for, or you can see some of the auctions there went for, you know, between, you know, let's say $5,000, give or take a couple thousand, right? So somewhere between $3,000 and $8,000 for some of these high-end customs. All right, usually they have a little more detail, there's more handwork involved, that kind of stuff, or they're just highly, highly sought after models or a particular variant of a custom. All right, then I would say there's sort of a step down from there in customs, where they're customs that some of those other names we just mentioned, like the Brad Southers and the Kirby Lamberts and the Gustavo Cecchinis and all that, you'll see some of their knives that come in, you know, closer to the $1,000 price point, but there's quite a big grouping of custom knives that are, you know, $800 to $1,500, right? So stuff like Marfione Customs and Brian Ty Customs and Strider Customs and, you know, Jaros and a number of other names that we could talk about that have become popular and do a great job, or are in very high demand is what I was trying to say, for their custom work. All right, we could even, so we're still really not in the category that I'm going to talk about, because what when I thought about this video, I wanted to do knives that most people would consider expensive, okay? Not knives that are truly in these outlandish prices, even though I know we're coming a little more down to earth in the last couple of classes. There are also some mid-tex, high-end production knives that are, you know, very expensive. Todd Begg Bodegas would be a good example of a mid-tech that, you know, often goes for $800 to $1,000, which is way outside of my interest and of course my ability. So finally, we're getting down to the knives like some of the ones you see here in front of you that are more in keeping with what I'm talking about. And I've used the Sebenza as a benchmark. So, you know, a Sebenza 25 or a Sebenza 21, sorry, goes for like 425 or something, a large. And so that's kind of the median price that I have shot for in this video. And so you're going to see, now not all of these knives, by the way, are on the list. Okay, but before we go any further, I would love to have you guys share with me some of your stories. What are the most expensive, crazy, outlandish knife sales you've heard about? Let me know in the comments below. And I think this will be like a really interesting, kind of fun to read comment section if you guys come up with some really interesting stuff along those lines. Now, let's finally get to my list of the top 5 expensive knives. And let me start moving some of these out of the way. Some of them will come back both as examples and as actual knives that make the list. You guys can speculate about this for a second. This guy's gonna stay because he is first on our list. So this the Rick Hinderer XM18 is a very popular, very well-known high-end production knife. Maybe even you could almost call it a limited production knife, although less so these days. And it's a great knife. It's a great all-around knife. It's not too big. It's not too small. It has a blade shape that is very robust and tough, but also capable for, you know, for the typical cutting tasks that we want to do with our knives. And also, these are not totally out of reach. Pretty much anyone on nearly any budget could, with enough time, you know, even if it took you a year, you could save up the $375 to $425 that it costs for one. All right, so XM18, why does that make the list? Number one, they're wildly popular. Number two, they're very well constructed. They're popular for a reason. They are really well done. And of course, they are at a price point, I think, that still would put them solidly in the that's an expensive knife category. Okay, so there you go. Rick Hinderer XM18 on the top 5 expensive knives. Now, it's the first one I'm mentioning, but I'm not calling it number 1, and I'm not really calling it number 5 either. Next on the list, actually, let me throw this back on so you got something to look at while I'm talking. Next on the list, and I'll roll a picture in here, is the Chris Reeves Sebenza. Now, primarily, I'm talking about the 21, but we could also include here sort of the 25 and Inkosi, which are quite close to it. Okay, again, very popular, really well put together, really good design, and of course, Chris Reeve is the frame lock guy. So these are sort of minimalist, very classic, and very capable folders. And again, I think they would qualify for most people as expensive knives. So next on the list, number 2. The middle of the list is one that stands out to me, okay? Stands out for any number of reasons. This is the Brad Southard Tall. Now this is, I think, the first generation of his mid-tech line. There are new versions of this now with different anodizations available and different hardware colors and stuff like that. But again, this is an exceptional knife. It's a little more expensive than the last 2 that we mentioned if you're going to buy one new. This one was used, so it wasn't that way. But these are just really well done. They're milled out, so they're lighter than you would anticipate them being. The blade shape is extremely useful. Everything about them just works exactly as you would want it to. You know, they look really nice. Just, I don't know, I cannot say enough good about the Southern Talk. They're just exceptional examples of what a mid-tech knife should be. And so because of that, these are definitely on the list. And if you're interested in a Sebenza or a Hinderer and you haven't looked at one of these, one, I would say if you get one of these, you may no longer be interested in the Sebenza or the Hinderer. You might still be, but these are truly exceptional for a mid-tech knife. Got a couple more to list here. We're not at 5 yet. Next is the Shirogorov. Now, I don't have a Shirogorov, and I know they're a little pricey to make this list, but because they're so popular and because they have such a reputation, even though the price is a little more than we wanted to talk about, I felt like I would be sort of remiss if I didn't include at least some comment about the Shirogorovs. And so, and by the way, they do come up for close to our price point. You know, I've seen a Shirogorov for, I've seen them for, you know, $500 or $600 range, and I've been offered Shirogorovs in trade for knives that are, you know, around that $450, $500 mark. So that's the next one on the list, the Shirogorov. Very, very well-built knife, great reputation, and people talk about them having the best action of any knife out there. Of course, a number of knives get that reputation. You think of Rexford Customs and a lot of others, but Shirogorov, number 4. Finally, fifth one we're going to mention, and again, let me say, I'm not listing these in particular order. You know, I did try to think about how I was going to list these, and I thought, you know what, let's just list them. I'm not even going to try to rank them beyond the top 5. So last one on the list, but certainly not least, is the Olamic Wayfarer 247. Great knife. Again, insanely popular. You know, everyone is talking about these. I've never heard of anything bad about them. People just rave about how amazing they are. And so this, again, now these, let me say this. If you're listening to this thinking about, hey, what knife should I be chasing? I don't think you'd go wrong to chase either a Talc or a Wayfarer as your first sort of higher end knife, and skip the Sebenza and the Hinderer for a little while, till a little while down the road. So those are, that rounds out the top 5, and the Wayfarer I think is a good way to do that because it's a little newer maybe than some of the others, even though I know the originals have been around a bit longer. Now, let me lastly bring up some honorable mentions, and that would be this knife, and let's pull in one other. Here we go. So there's a Wee knife and a Riat knife, and I want to mention Custom Knife Factory as well. If you're kind of, what would you say, wanting to get into this, the higher end stuff, but maybe you don't want to quite drop the amount of money that they're looking for some of them, Wee Knives is a great way to get some really high end stuff, as is Riat Knives on the used or the secondary market, and Custom Knife Factory on the secondary market. So they get kind of an honorable mention. Lastly, a mention, but not honorable, is Strider knives. Now, these are, again, very popular, almost to the point of a modern classic. However, there are a couple issues I have. One, my experience with Striders has been they don't cut well, and I kind of want my knives to cut well. But also, there are some real questions about the legitimacy of Mick Strider's military experience, and so I don't want to give a lot of credit to someone who has lied about something that is of that importance, okay? So one last very kind of passing mention I'm going to give to Zero Tolerance. And Zero Tolerance I'm mentioning because of the fact that a lot of the features that these knives we've been looking at have, you can get into Zero Tolerance. It may not be quite as polished, may not be quite as high-end, may not be quite as much detail, but they're overall very well done. And probably if you're into high-end knives, one of the better values out there is the Zero Tolerance stuff. Hope you enjoyed the video, guys. And again, don't forget to share some of your stories with me. Also, let me know if you have a particular favorite out of the ones I've mentioned, or you've got one that I didn't bring up that you felt like should have been on the list. Hope to hear from you down there in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll talk to you soon.